Hey YouTube, it's time for a little Friday philosophy. Let's start this off with the Hawaiian shirt and the Panama hat. It's actually quite cool here in Nebraska this evening, and I'm starting to feel as though summer may be drawing to a close. So I am reluctantly going to accept that by wearing my Panama hat and my Hawaiian shirt that actually came from Hawaii. Now, I didn't go to Hawaii, but a friend of mine brought it back and gave it to me. Nevertheless, it is a very pleasant but slightly cool evening here in the great Midwest, but it beats the hell out of Corpus Christi, Texas, where you have to swim to your own car right now. So, God bless all our Texas friends. I hope they are safe and in high ground somewhere. Anyway, time to buckle up. This one could get a little heavy, hopefully not too lengthy, but we shall see in, 25 minutes. We'll find out. I did battle with a friend of mine this week, and it wasn't a comfortable battle to speak of, but it was something that needed to be done. And I'll do a little bit of setup. I don't want to spend too much time on this. It's part of the main point, but not the ultimate. Anyway, he is a part-time bartender, and the bar owner who usually works is laid up because of a knee surgery. So all of the other bartenders have stepped up to the plate and are filling in shifts. Anyway, I called this friend of mine earlier this week and just said, hey, tell me about, what's going on, such and such. Well, nothing, blah, We talked for a couple of minutes. I said, well, wait a minute, don't you have to work? And he says, no, I don't work today. I said, well, are you sure? Because I thought that the other bartender said that he was occupied. No, I don't have to work. I wrote it down. I don't have to. Okay, well, hey, none of my business. I don't work there. But I said, you may just want to check up on that. Well, he didn't. And as it turns out, he was supposed to work. And so the bar opened an hour and a half later than it was supposed to, because he didn't show up. And I said, well, wait a minute. Isn't that, doesn't that fall at least partially on you? Well, no, I wrote it down. But that's not the point. You have stepped up to help cover to make sure that this place is okay. And, my warning, although I am by no means a knowledgeable source, my warning should have triggered something inside to say, hey, maybe I should check in on this. And he didn't. And I don't want to make this into more than it is, because it was literally just a conversation, but it was one of those kind of I told you so moments by me, which, makes me a jerk, that's fair. It's not my place to judge in any of this. But I said, you are always thinking of other people first. That's what this guy does. And I said, at some point in your head, I know it triggered that, I should go check. And you didn't. So I said, doesn't that make you at least partially responsible? And he says, well, yeah, but. And that's where the conversation ends. Yeah, but. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Jim Rohn, motivational speaker who made a fortune as kind of the front man for a lot of years for Herbalife. Herbalife is one of those network marketing things, one of the first really successful ones that started in the 80s and plowed through the 90s. I'm not sure the status of it these days. But anyway, Jim Rohn, one of his things was accepting responsibility is one of the last hurdles to becoming an adult. And I kind of tend to agree with that. It's never easy to admit when we're wrong. We've all had those yeah, but moments. Yeah, I'm wrong, but it's because of this. And, insert random excuse here. And it grinds me the wrong way. And that's why I say this one could go on for a bit. So I'm going to relight my pipe. Now I'm going to tell you a little story about my dog. This still relates, mind you. My beagle is 10 and a half years old. And today I left the house and apparently mistakenly left a loaf of bread on the counter. So I came home this evening, no loaf of bread on the counter. The loaf of bread is now in my living room. But it's no longer a loaf, it's a half of loaf. My dog, at 10 and a half years old, and he's a beagle. He's a short beagle. He's a 13-incher, not a 15-incher. So his reach is not that great. Had to have jumped up and down a couple of times, first to spot the bread, second and or third time to then grab it. Very delicately took the plastic, those square plastic ties, the ones that just pinch the bread or the bag shut. Very delicately pulled that off. Proceeded to stick his snout right into the bag of bread and just pick pieces out of it. Not a crumb left on the floor. So I came home and I yelled at him. He's 10 and a half. We're past the age of disciplining in any sort of physical sense. Slapping him on the hind end means nothing. He's like, look at me, I'm old. But anyway, I was talking to somebody else tonight and telling them the story, and every time I mentioned the word bread, the dog's tail dropped and he would go slinking back to his bed. And so even my dog understands a sense of responsibility. I mean, it's amazing to me he even understands what the word bread means, but he knew he was responsible for that action. And how is it a dog has a stronger sense of responsibility than a great many adults? It's just fascinating to me. And I get it. I mean, I was a young professional. I was a kid first. I didn't do that. I don't know how that broke. I wasn't playing ball in the house. We, from a very early age, learn how to make excuses to avoid getting into trouble or to avoid disappointing people. And nobody's exempt from that. But, and I remember in 6th grade, I had an inflatable crayon that stood about 4 foot tall. And I hated that thing. It felt like a kid's toy, and it was. But it had been in my room for 3 or 4 years, which is an eternity when you're a child. And one day, I stuck it with a pin. I was tired of it. Mom would not let it go away, and I wanted it to go away, so I stuck it with a pin. Well, of course, my mother travels through my bedroom about an hour later. Says, well, what happened to the crayon? I don't know. It just started losing air. Hands on her hips, and very sternly, what happened to the crayon? And of course, as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, I wilted. I said, I poked it with a pin. Why would you do that? I said, well, because I don't like it. Well, that's destructive. There's a whole other diatribe that went along with it. But very reluctantly, I had to take responsibility for that action. And my mother expressed repeatedly, over the course of many weeks, her disappointment in me. But it's interesting because at that moment, I realized, I think, not at the age of 10, but I started to realize at that point that there's merit to taking responsibility for your actions, even the wrong actions. And you can fast forward to college, high school, working world, whatever it is, girls or boys, depending on your gender and or orientation. There's always an excuse. I was late because, but it's not my fault. And how many times in our lives has it not been our fault? or where we've claimed such. And we've gotten away with it, or at least we believe that. I think ultimately, probably 90% of the time, we don't actually get away with it, but we think we do. And again, as a young professional, nothing was ever my fault. Well, yeah, it's late, but they got me the information late. Well, yeah, there's a typo in it, but it was proofread by 2 other people. You can't blame me because I missed it. There's all of those things. Oh, you didn't have enough? Oh, well, yeah, your 300 looked like a 200. There's all of those things that come into play in our lives where, it's my, no, I didn't. It's still your fault, or it's still somebody else's fault. Come on, man, put it away. Put it away. In my last profession as a news photographer, in part because I sensed that my supervisor was weak, I learned how to take responsibility for stuff. And it's weird to put it in that frame of mind, but because he was weak, I knew I wasn't ultimately going to get in trouble for it. But there's a lesson at the end of this. So something would go wrong, and I would say, yeah, it's my fault. You'd say, oh. Well, in utter disbelief. Oh. Okay, well, then just fix it and let's not do that again. Okay. 3 months later, 6 months later, something else would happen. Well, what happened here? Well, that's my fault. I missed the assignment. I forgot. I overslept. Whatever the actual thing was, but I said, it's on me. I own that. Oh. Well, just don't let it happen again. And through that process, I learned that taking responsibility, first of all, other than just being the right thing to do, really as bad as we imagine, and far less combative than trying to blame it on somebody else. Because you know what? You put it off onto somebody else. If somebody else hears that or finds out about it, guess what? They don't like that much. And secondly, you go through that questioning phase with whoever the other person is. Well, are you sure that's what happened? Well, yeah, I'm sure. I'm telling you the truth. Are you couldn't have fixed this? No, really? No, I did it right because I do everything right all the time. At some point, we have to step up to the plate and own things, whatever things are. And what I have found over the last few years, hang on a second. What I have found with myself over the last few years is that I've come to take responsibility for things that aren't my fault. I mean, I don't just step in front of a runaway train and be like, hey, I got this. But the scenario where there's 5 people working on a project, and let's split responsibility even. 20% across the board. Project shows up late. Whose fault is it? The last guy to touch it or the first guy? What about the 3 in the middle? Do they bear any responsibility whatsoever? Because chances are when that project comes in late, everybody starts pointing fingers. Well, guy number 5 knew it had to be in. It's his fault for not getting it done. Guy number 5 says, well, gal number 3 didn't get it to gal number 4 until a week past the deadline. So I therefore got it late. You know what? Everybody wants to point fingers, but in reality, each one of those 5 in that scenario bears a part of responsibility because they had the opportunity to influence the outcome. And, I've been on the beginning, the middle, and the end of that chain, and many times I have said, not my fault. But over the years I've learned, yeah, it is my fault. Why wasn't I calling person number, pause for a second. Make me guy number 5. Why wasn't I calling 4 and 3 to say, hey, where are we on this? Because we're running out of time. Or as number 3, why am I not calling and saying, hey, I know I got my stuff done late, but I just want to make sure we're on track. What can I do to help? It's really that simple. And, we can get into the passive-aggressive politics of cubicle zoo world or contractor world or whatever world we all live in. But if something doesn't get done and we had a chance to influence the outcome, we're all responsible. And I'm not talking about global thermonuclear war. I'm talking about our day-to-day lives. Chances are there are a lot of things each of us can do to follow up, to check in, to make sure that things are happening the way they need to happen. Or, in my case, that I put the bread away. I have nobody to blame but me. Do I blame the dog for following his instincts and stealing bread off the counter? Actually, I find it pretty remarkable at 10 and a half he could get to the damn bread. But it's my fault for leaving it out there. See how that all came back around? Who knew that was going to happen? Not this guy. That just worked itself in. Anyway, I don't want to belabor the point, but shirking responsibility, putting responsibility off onto somebody else, claiming no fault, means ultimately that you have no stake in the game. And I think in my world, it's far better for me to step up to the plate and say, you know what? I could have influenced the outcome. I didn't. I will own this failure. Taking that action has gotten me a lot farther in my life than claiming to be perfect and trying to absolve myself of any responsibility. There is a certain truth to being able to step up to the plate and say, you know what? Yeah, it is my fault. Now, is it all my fault? Not necessarily, but could I have changed the outcome with a little bit of effort? You betcha. And you can apply that to any facet of your life, even your own personal existence. If you're overweight, if you drink too much, if you don't work hard enough. We all have excuses for why we have failures in our lives, but if you really want to get down and do some hard self-examination, it comes back to each and every one of us as an individual. I'm the reason I'm overweight. I'm the reason I drink too much. Friday night scotch, what the hell, we'll throw that in there too. We are still responsible for our own failures in life. There's no casting that off onto somebody else. I brought up Jim Rohn earlier. Rohn, I apologize, R-O-H-N. He goes through a thing about excuses when he was a youngster too, and he said one of his things was he used to blame his failures on the weather, among other things, but weather was one of them. And he says, yeah, I used to blame my problems on the weather. He said, until I discovered it rains on the rich too. Seems fairly logical. We all have battles to overcome. We all have circumstances to fight through. But if we aren't where we want to be, at the end of the day, it still goes back to us. So whether it's you personally, mentally, physically, your relationships, your work, your family's economic whatever, it's up to you to fix it. It's up to me to fix it, my situations. And I've got a couple that I'm working on, man. And hopefully, someday I'll be able to tell you about that with a success story and not one of failure. Because if it's failure, it's my fault. And I know that. I have earned it. I will own it. I own the fact that I'm not in better shape than I am right now. So anyway, I hate to drag this on any longer than I have to, but I am going to leave you with a little joke if I can do this without screwing it up. And if I do screw it up, it's probably going to be funnier anyway. But Billy the Frog decided to go in and see a fortune teller. And the fortune teller sits down with him and says, "Oh, Billy," he says, "I see in your future there is a wonderful, beautiful young lady who's going to want to get to know you inside and out." Well, Billy, obviously thrilled by this, says, "How do I meet this wonderful woman? Is this through online dating? Do I meet her at a bar?" And the fortune teller looks at him and quite candidly says, "Biology class." That's all I got. I mean, seriously, that's all. That's I don't do jokes. I'll leave that to the experts. Nevertheless, I hope I've given you something to ponder on aside from biology. I'm going to sit out here and enjoy the final throes of summer, but no matter who you are or where you are, I hope you're having a great evening and hope you have a better weekend. We'll talk to you again soon.